Yes, so my name is Joshua. I'll be taking you through machine learning architecture for non-invasive dyslexia screening via behavioral telemetry and a severe class imbalance. This is group 56. So to start with, dyslexia is a common neurobiological learning problem that affects the way people process information, and it's usually found in students who are in ages between 5 to 16, and they experience a lot of difficulty in reading and writing. So this makes them to Yes, so I'll be taking you through machine learning architecture for non-invasive dyslexia screening via behavior telemetry under severe class imbalance. This is Joshua Katumba, and this is group 56. So to start with, dyslexia is a common neurobiological learning disability that affects how people process information. And usually, students are the ones that face out of challenges since it doesn't allow them to read and to write properly, which can affect them academically in institutional environments. So education experts estimate that dyslexia may affect 13%, not 14% of school populations. And to address this issue, we decided to come up with a machine learning model that has an architecture which can be able to track the problem at an early stage. Now, we are following a framework called the DAEL framework, which is Dyslexia Adaptive E-Learning. And this framework is tailored for students with those special needs. It was developed through research in Middlesex University. So this framework aims at improving the learning experience for individuals with dyslexia. And it has a machine learning model which is able to detect dyslexia via handwriting patterns using transfer learning and visual techniques. So in our machine learning model, we aim at finding if a student has dyslexia or not, and we want to discover it as early as possible. Now, for our domain, you're looking at students with dyslexia, students with trouble reading, spelling, and also processing written information. Then, many students with dyslexia remain undiagnosed due to lack of accessible screening tools at an early stage. So there was need for scalable, non-invasive systems that can detect this at early stages. And the goal is to develop a machine learning model for dyslexia screening under severe class imbalance. So we develop a machine learning model that can predict whether the student has dyslexia or not via telemetry data. Then what that model is going to consider is how long it's going to take them to read the word or the sentence, how many errors they will make, and how well can they spell or understand the content. And afterwards, the model will be able to detect patterns in performance, decide whether the student should slow down or keep the same pace or even speed it up. Um, these were our research questions. How can machine learning be used for non-invasive dyslexia screening via behavior telemetry? Then also, we had project objectives, which involved to analyze behavior telemetry data, to handle class imbalance, to improve prediction accuracy, then to evaluate the model's performance, and also to learn the outcomes and engagements for the students. So to start with, we have problem identification, acquiring data, carrying out explanatory data analysis, data preparation, model selection and building, model training, evaluation, prediction, and then finally deployment. So our data set, it contained over 3,644 rows, columns 197, two classes, yes or no, 6 trials, that's for clicks, hits, misses, accuracy, and miss rate. In class imbalance, we had over 3,252 non-dyslexic patients. Then we had 392 dyslexic students. That was a 9-to-1 ratio, which was the imbalance. The source was Kaggle. So pre-processing, we had our rows here, and we checked for missing values. We carried out label encoding. Then we went to feature scaling. Finally, we're handling the class imbalance check. And then we split a test and a train set. That was an 80 to a 20 split and model training. So these were our results. And these results, we use figures, tables with clear axes to show the EDA that we carried out. So this is a bar graph of showing males and females distribution of gender. Then the next one was looking about native language, whether that person had dyslexia but was speaking the native language, yes or no. Then the other language was for the other people who didn't speak the native language. Then you also had a histogram, which was showing distribution of age. And also we had dyslexia count, as well as age distribution using box plots. And we also have gender distribution by their status. So whether it's a female or male, and if they have or if they don't. Then we also looked at native language distribution by dyslexia status, which was the same as for the other language. We are looking at also distribution via dyslexia status. Then you had the mean accuracy. We also looked at mean miss rates and also the mean hits blocks by dyslexia status. So we also had correlational heat maps to show the accuracy of the blocks. And then we had mean miss rates and box plots to show the miss rate, also the mean hits and the mean clicks. Afterwards, went to model selection. We had an MLP model, which was to capture nonlinear relationships in the behavior data, in a tabnet that was paying attention to important behavior features, in a graphical neural network, which was modeling relationships between samples in behavior data. Then extreme learning machines, those ones were providing fast and efficient classification. We also had one-dimensional CNN, which was simple, fast, and it was able to process 1D sequential data. Then we also had the 1D reset, which introduces skip connections that allow training of much further deeper networks. So we also had the hybrid. So it uses the CNN to extract spatial features at the BILSTM to capture sequential dependencies for processing both forward and backward directions. Then you had the transformer, it was used for multi-model study to integrate cross-modularity, LightGBM to improve speed and performance, and CatBoost for handling numerical and categorical features without preprocessing. So this was our MLP. We look at the input layer, then we had two hidden layers, and then a final output. The two layers, first one had 128 neurons. That's where now predictions start take place. Then the second one had 64 neurons. And we had a tabnet, which had an input layer. It had a feature transformer block, and then it had a sparse max mask, which selects a feature. Then it had the second one and the third one. And afterwards, it aggregates all the outputs to find out the output if someone has dyslexia or not. Then we looked at the graphical neural network, which had an input. And then afterwards, it constructed the graph itself, with the graph having 5 neighbors besides each node. And then from there, in the graph, there was layer 1, then layer 2, and finally the output layer. And for the extreme learning machines, we had a single input layer. Then we had over 1,000 neurons in a hidden layer, which were carrying out the processing on the data, and finally the output. Then for LightGBM, we had the large data set with many features being passed on to multiple decision trees, 3 here, and then finally a prediction. Then for the CatBoost, we did data exploration, preprocessing, data splitting, then used hyperparameter tuning so that we can fine tune our model. Then we had the CNN, which had layers at specific intervals which carried out data processing. The same applies to the 1D ResNet, which also had multiple layers. And on those layers, there's auto processing that was being carried on to find out predictions. It was the same thing with the hybrid. So the hybrid CNN and the by LSTM, which was having an input layer. Then it had the 1D layers, the max pooling layers, and the bidirectional layers. And all these layers were taking on input, which input later on was used to carry out predictions and come up with the final output. So model deployment, we successfully deployed our model, which was an extreme learning machine. It scored an accuracy of 89%, but at the same time, it gave us the best recall, which was 38.5. And I remember we had a class imbalance. So that means that we have students without dyslexia and students with dyslexia. And their class was small. It was a ratio of 9 to 1, meaning that we wanted a model that was both sensitive to the dyslexia class and also one which could actually predict those without dyslexia. Now, here is our deployment architecture. At the website, the user fills in their data, input fields. So we had the misses, age, and then the upload buttons, which take that data through a data request and it's passed up to the Python app, which was uploaded. So now it works as our backend. And then that data or that request is sent through an interface call to the model itself, which is saved as the job lib. Then it carries out the prediction. It sends the result back to the app.py, which later responds in JSON and gives an output. So for techniques, we had legislation where we're transferring knowledge from large models to a compressed one. In an approach, we had the full model, which had 15 ELMs with 1,000 neurons, totaling up to 10,000, 15K neurons, right? So the elite model was a single ELM with 15 neurons. Then the elite model was trained on soft probability scores from the full sample. We managed to achieve a 300x compression, and these were our final results. So from there, I carried out model quantization. Where quantization lowers the precision of the model weights from a high precision to a lower one. And we applied two types. First one was the float 32 and the int 8. Then the approach for float 32 quantization was reorganized model storage and also cut in size by 50. Then for int 8, sorry, quantization, we converted 32-bit float weights to 8-bit integers, reducing size by 87.5%. And our final results were as below. Then for model pruning, we remove the least important neurons from the hidden layer of the ELM. So neurons with small weight contributions are eliminated. And the approach is the baseline ELM had 1,000 hidden neurons. We pruned it down to 800 neurons by removing 200 least important. And finally, we evaluated our model, our test set after pruning. So the base ELM had an 89.4% accuracy. After pruning, we got 89.16. So in conclusion, we selected an int8 quantization for production deployment because it provides the best balance for compression speed and accuracy. Conclusions, we carried out ED on 25 visualizations using our dataset, and then we also successfully deployed our model, an extreme learning machine that gave us an accuracy of 89%. And our study demonstrates that potential machine learning in enabling non-invasive dyslexia screening using telemetry data is possible. So our limitations were our records were through clicks and performances. Then all our data was done on previous data, which means it wasn't data that was presently got. And also there's a big bias in our model having an imbalance in the class with a ratio of 9 to 1. So we shall keep on improving the model performance, conducting a pilot study for deployment and integrating this system into real-time screening tools. Thank you for listening.